Welcome back to another episode of Home Service Headquarters. Today, I got the chance to talk to, in my humble opinion, a service business podcast legend in Tyler Martin. Tyler is the host of Profit and Grit and the owner of CFO Made Easy, and spent time with me today talking everything from hustle and mindset to solutions for cash flow problems. Let's get into the interview. Welcome back to another episode of Home Service Headquarters. Today, I welcome on a special guest, somebody who I look up to in a way in terms of home service podcast industry. That is Tyler Martin. Tyler, how are you doing today?
Good, Jack. Thanks for being here. Super excited, man.
So lots of things we can get into today with you. Let's start with just your famous line, a way you start every podcast, and that's tell me something about you personally.
Yeah. So on the personal side, things that I like, I'm into pickleball. I'm into hiking. Okay. I'm blessed to be in California. So we have places to hike all over the place within 5 minutes to 3 hours. Those are two things I really enjoy. I'm self-employed. I work predominantly from home, have about 40 clients across the United States, mostly in trades, home services, electrical and plumbing. And I've been married to my wonderful wife for, I hope I don't get this wrong, 21 years. We're coming up on 22.
Wrong, yeah. Email me. We'll edit it out. Give me a call. Please. Make sure, or we'll update it. We'll do an AI voiceover and then make sure that we don't get into hot water.
So you're a great host, Jack. You got my back.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to scratch the back. I did have one of our other episodes, a good friend of mine, Doug Rucker, was telling a story about his wife and how she had the idea to start his company first, and he kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. And she actually walked in while he was in the interview and set the record straight. So we have, at Home Service Headquarters, we've played in this arena a little bit before having to help our guests out. So yeah, it is wrong. Absolutely no issue there.
That's hilarious.
Amazing. So pickleball, we'll actually have to talk about that when we hang up here, because I just, for Christmas this year, my wife and I got our first paddles. So
nice.
Might have to pick your brain on things beyond just financials of service businesses, which is where we'll spend most of our time.
Absolutely.
But before we get there, I also want to talk about Profit and Grit. I want to make sure that we don't forget to send people your way. I know I have been there many a time learning different things, and now I'm lucky enough to get to interview you. But talk a little bit about the podcast, what it is, and what you do over there.
Yeah, so Profit and Grit, it's a podcast that's been around a little over a year. I think I published 54 episodes so far. Every week, like you, I interview someone in the home services space. Most often it's HVAC, plumbing, and electric, but I've gone into other areas too. I had a power washing a while back. I had a painter when I first started out, restoration. But I try to mix it between a couple different things. One is talking to actual business owners that have gone through, whether they've been able to get over the hump and they've scaled to 20 million, or they're stuck at 3 million. And we talk about what are some things that are challenges that they're facing. So that's one area I love to talk to. And then experts in the area that focus absolutely just in the home services area. And so, a lot of times those might be like marketing people are the common one. Coaches come up a lot. It could be finance people like me in the space. And they just make people that are focused in this area as fun discussions, because the community's small, relatively speaking, and you kind of hear of the same problems. You kind of hear of the same roadblocks. And so it's fun to hear different perspectives on how to get through those roadblocks.
That is one of my favorite things too. And even in our short history, you start to hear at least similar problems or similar aspects of success. For example, the number one that I always seem to hear whenever I talk to business owners is hustle. In some way, shape, or form, big, small, or growing, it's always somehow coming back to hustle. And I think that's a fun part of it.
That's a big one. Yeah. The one I see, I would say, in terms of, as much as I'm not a mindset guy, mindset plays a big part of how far you can go. And then along with that is consistency and having processes. One that really sticks out to me is I recently had met with someone that her name is Alyssa Rogers. She was actually on my show. And what they did is they were kind of stuck in this $2 million area. And they went and saw a coach, and the coach said, "You're thinking too small, guys. Like, you should be thinking bigger, like $100 million." And now they're at $10 million. They have 3 locations. And it was all because of their mindset, not thinking
Sure.
like, we can do more, and having someone that gave them that a little bit of a roadmap that they could follow. So those are big things that always like kind of blow my mind, for lack of better words. Is this could very well be a $5 million shop, and that's as big as they were going to get. But because they crossed paths with someone that got them to think bigger, they're now on a path to 100 million, or in their mind, that's what their goal
Yeah.
is. Whether they hit it or not is another story, but that's how they're working towards.
That's amazing too. And I'm sure, there are maybe minor process tweaks and things like that that go along with that. But, if the major first step is just starting to think it,
Yeah.
that's a pretty attainable step one for pretty much everybody.
Right. Right.
Amazing. I was going to ask, and we can edit this out if you want. Do you have a favorite episode or two, maybe, if people were watching this or going to say, hey, I'm going to go check out Profit and Grit? Where would you suggest they start?
Oh, that's a tough one.
And we won't clip this one. This one won't end up on Instagram
Yeah.
Reels or YouTube Shorts. That'd be just asking for trouble. But
I'm an open book, though, so feel free anytime, anything you want to ask me. It's fair game in this podcast. But that's a tough one. I would probably say, my mind always wants to go to the most recent just because it's fresh in my mind. So I want to be careful. I think one of my favorite episodes was probably, I don't remember what number it was in the top 5. A guy named Idon Spicer. He ran a restoration company. And what I loved about his story, because I feel like it's the fabric of our country in a lot of ways, is he came over as an immigrant. He literally was eating cup of noodles as a way of starting his carpet cleaning business when he started out. And they were, I think it was either 2 or 3 guys, I don't know how many, but they were living really frugally. They were going out and eating cup of noodles so they could buy the next piece of equipment. And at some point they ran into restoration as they were cleaning carpets. And they're like,
Okay.
man, our model's broken. We're doing like, and I'm making this up because I don't remember the amount, $100 carpet cleans. And these people are coming in and doing $10,000 restoration jobs. We just need the equipment. And so they continued to eat their cup of noodles. They behaved very frugally and bought pieces of equipment as they needed them. And now he's got a multi, I don't know if it's multinational, but it's a franchise doing restoration. So that's to me, that's like tugs at my heart, because anyone that's immigrated, there's been so many people that have immigrated over here and become successful. It's just, to me, like that's classic American story. So that would be one. And then I got to say Alyssa Rogers would be in there, the top 2, just because, I work with small businesses my whole life, my whole career, pretty much 20 plus years. And so many times we get stuck at a certain point in our business, and we're thinking like we're a $1 million business. We're thinking we're a $5 million business, and that's what we become. And I love her story of just thinking bigger and executing on it. And her town is only 10,000 people. So for them to become a $10 million company, that wouldn't have been feasible to have one location. They had to have multiple locations to meet their goals. So I would say that's another one right near the top, Jack.
Amazing. What I love about that too is, you pick out 2, and we talked about, common themes being hustle and mindset, and both, pretty prominently figure
for sure.
to feature those things. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we could probably talk all day, or at least I could, about the podcast, but let's shift to get into providing some expertise that you have to our listeners. And that focuses on CFO Made Easy, but let's take even one step back before then, or maybe, 20 steps back, as you mentioned, 20 years career, and just give us a career history where you've been throughout different businesses and maybe specifically service businesses.
Yeah. So I started my career as a CPA and worked with small firms for a good 10 years, got certified. I'm still currently an active CPA. I don't do any taxes, but I went down that path, and I really loved working with different clients. There was nothing more exciting than seeing how people were making money, and like just I got a bird's eye view. So that always like fired me up, but I didn't really care for the tax part. That never really like got my juices. Having said that, I started my own firm. I built it to 200 business clients, but I always used to like kind of fantasize like, man, if I didn't have to do taxes and I could just talk with my clients about how to make their business better. And this is way before coaching and, that's so mainstream now, and fractional
Sure.
CFOs. But I kind of agonize over it. Like, how could I make this where I'm just not doing the tax part, but I'm helping people? And so that always stuck with me. But along that journey of running my CPA practice, one of my clients was starting an engineering services firm. This guy named Tim, and we got close. Became buddies, and he was raising a family of 5, so he was pretty getting kind of tapped out, starting a new business. I'm sure you can relate to this to some degree. Starting a new business, 5 kids, just spread out all over the place. He said, "Hey, would you ever want to join my company in an operational capacity, accounting and operational, and let's grow this thing and sell it?" And this was after like 2 or 3 years I had helped him get the business going more at an advisory role. And long story short, I ended up selling my firm, sold it right away, joined his company. After 2 years or so working there, he was supposed to be doing the business development, and truthfully, raising 5 kids, just he wasn't like coming into the office like probably what I had envisioned. And so I talked with him about that, and I ended up taking a bigger piece of the business in terms of running it, to where the point I was really kind of like an acting CEO, doing hiring, firing, negotiated lease for our new building. You name it, I was
Sure.
doing it, managing all the cash flow, the business finances, and ultimately built it to about 25 million a year. Took about 10 years. We ended up selling it to a company back east, and it was a big company, a multi-billion-dollar family-held company. But I quickly realized, like, I didn't want to be part of a big company. My whole career is around small business. I love it. It fires me up. I love working with owners directly. And so I had a 2-year employment agreement, and I left after 1 year. I was like, I just can't do this. Like, I guaranteed money. I mean, they literally, if they fired me, I would have got my 2 years of pay, but
Sure.
it just wasn't in my DNA. So I went and joined a fractional CFO group, and I said, "Hey, this is cool," but they were in the tech space. And honestly, as much as I'm absolute tech freak when it comes to like gadgets and stuff, the whole tech world like just bored the crap out of me. Like, they get big old milestone tranches of investments. They try to spend every penny. You even get into any type of discussion about efficiency. Maybe I never forget one client spent like $50,000 on a recruiting fee. And I'm like, these guys are gouging you. Like, you do not have to be paying that. Let's negotiate. He's like, dude, I don't care. I don't have time for that. I just need to get this person in. And like, so it was just a different world of anything
Yeah.
I'd ever been part of. Like, I was always about, how do you make the business more efficient? How do you scale the business? How do you grow? And it was just a different mindset. So after a year, I'm like, I got to get out of here. This is not feeding my soul. So I ended up going to a nonprofit. It was like $100 million nonprofit. I'm like, thinking, okay, this is going to feed my soul. This is going to be like, I'm going to be helping people, but I'll still get to be an executive with the finance side. I was on the executive management team, controller, cool role, groom for CFO. What I quickly realized is nonprofits in general are very bureaucratic, and same thing with a nonprofit. They weren't interested in being optimal. The more people that they hired, the more funding they got. Honestly, to some degree, the more efficient, not overtly, but the more inefficient they were, the more funding they got. And I quickly go, man, this is we're part of the problem here. We're not solving a problem.
Yeah.
Is the way I was feeling. And as you can tell, like feeding my soul is really important in things I do. Like
Mm-hmm.
money will follow. Like, I don't even care about money; it'll follow.
100%.
So I left that, and then I'm like, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life now? My original goal was to retire at 58. My dad did, and what I quickly realized is I am never probably going to retire. I like the chase. I like working with people. I like, as long as my faculties are there. I just don't really
Mm-hmm.
see this changing that much.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's where the fractional CFO stuff started. Is I started with business coaching, and although I help people, what I realized is when you're doing strictly business coaching, it's really about goals. It's really about helping people get better. But a lot of people, they hire a coach because they have hope, and it gives them hope. But like most of us, our execution isn't there. Like, as soon as when it comes to doing the real work of it, it's not quite as fun as the hoping that we can get there. And so I felt like a lot of times in the business coaching, it was hard because people didn't want to execute. They didn't want to do the roll up their sleeves and get the job done stuff. And so
Hmm.
that's when I slightly morphed my services after about 2 years. Maybe it was a year. And I went pure fractional CFO. I said, hey, the part I love is the finance side. I know really well how to scale a business. I know really well how to give advisory services to people in terms of where they can improve. And that's ever since I've been doing that. I think it's 6, 7 years. I've got, like I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned it, like 40 clients across the United States, growing
Hmm.
really fast. And it's something now I feel like I'm providing a high level value. It fits very well for me, and it's a great chance once again to get a front row seat to every business owner that's going through. A lot of times they feel very individual, the problems, but they very much overlap the same problems with many businesses.
Sure. It's an amazing story, and what's apparent to me, and it's probably easy to say this at a bird's eye view, but you were kind of always winding your way towards doing exactly what you ended up doing
Exactly.
now, which is amazing. And that just speaking to feeding your soul, and obviously you're very successful as you're going along. Um, One other question I had with that: so service business are primarily where you focus. Were you working with, maybe even back to that very first company, service businesses in the CPA role, or when did service businesses kind of come into it?
Yeah, I mean, I always had, it was all, I never was really heavy in any type of manufacturing roles or anything that had cost accounting. It was usually always some type of consulting, home service business, construction,
Sure.
more on a trades type level. So yeah, I always had a healthy client base in that space. I think what fired me up about home services really it was definitely when I was CPA, but it was more when I started CFO Made Easy. I acquired a couple clients in that space, and what I quickly realized is how much help they needed, and then also how cool that generally. Every industry has variety, but generally they're really cool people. Like they're just people that are really good at what their trade is, never had any formal financial training. And so when they hit a roadblock in that financial area, it's not always clear. And
Hmm.
so it's just something that I kind of fell into, for lack of better words, and it's now I've made it a focus of my practice, and I think probably in the future it'll probably be my only focus because it is
Okay.
definitely the majority of my practice. But I do have a couple other little areas of niches. The staffing and recruiting from the engineering services is one, and
Sure.
then I've helped a lot of mental group health practices, so that's another
Very
niche,
cool.
kind of a unique niche. But
Yeah.
once again, it's the people I really like in that space. It's oftentimes a sole owner that just the first thing they say to me is, hey, I wasn't trained to be a financial person. And so it's just I can help bridge that gap. And the spirit of what I do, and that's why I named it CFO Made Easy, is the spirit, if I'm doing a good job, is to try to not make this sound like it's another foreign language. it's
Yeah.
it's not that complicated in the grand scheme. And can be broken down in a way almost anyone can understand it, and it should be broken down in that way. But a lot of times I think when we're professionals, we like to make things sound a lot more complicated than we need to.
Yes, that's probably my biggest pet peeve professionally, and that's something that I think you do a really, really good job of. Even I, and I say it's my biggest pet peeve. Even I find myself in meetings or different things. What am I made that too complicated.
Yeah.
You do an amazing job, even in conversation and also in your podcast of not doing that. And I'm sure that lends itself so well to what you do financially for these companies.
Yeah, try hard, but even like you, a lot of times I'll be like, I can see the client's eyes glaze over, and I
Whoops.
don't ever view that as what I'm saying they're having trouble understanding. I view that as, man, I'm not breaking this down in a way that can connect with them. And so I'll admittedly, I say many times in meetings, I'll be like, I think I'm confusing you. Let's back
Hmm.
up. And I'm big on visuals too. Like nothing beats when I first meet with a client, a new client, potential new client, nothing beats pulling up a balance sheet and just going, hey, do you really have a negative $300,000 in your checking account? Do you see this line? And they'll go, oh my God, no, I never have that. Go, okay,
Yeah.
that's something we're going to need to look at. And you just go down the line, and they draw their own conclusions of the data they're seeing. And
Hmm.
sadly, I see that example as something I actually see quite a bit.
That's crazy.
It is. It is.
The thing about it too is You're working with these business owners who are in, you said primarily HVAC, electrical, and plumbing.
Yeah,
What they're doing in terms of their actual work is much more
I
complicated
know.
than, the financial literacy that you are providing. It's just put in a way that's very complicated. So somebody like you can bridge that gap. And I'm sure, once they kind of understand the lingo, or, you can provide visuals or different things, probably clicks pretty darn easily. And CFO Made Easy becomes maybe more than just a company name. It becomes reality for them.
Right, right. I mean, it's predicated for it to be easy to understand. The data has to be correct. I think a
Mhm.
big problem is a lot of times the data isn't correct, so it's hard to really understand things. I had a guy come to me the other day, and he said, "Hey, I don't get it, man. I'm like, my bookkeeper, I'm running financials, is saying I'm losing $650,000, and there's no way I could be losing that much." And he goes on to his way that he's backed into the accounting of why that can't be true,
Mhm.
and turns out he's right. There's a bunch of stuff on his balance sheet that's all wrong, and it's
Mhm.
distorting what's on the P&L. And so, but he doesn't really understand those connections and
Yeah.
correlations. And so, someone like me or someone that provides services like me has to first make sure we have real clean data, and then bridging that gap is a lot easier. To your point, like it's not, what they're doing is way more complex. The typical home service tradesperson mentally is so much ahead in terms of the complexity of what they do relative, in my humble
Mhm.
opinion, to what I do. So I agree with you 100%.
So you started to touch on it. I'm very curious about the general process. So say new company comes and starts with you. What's step one look like? Maybe what's the first 3 months look like versus a more managed account?
Yeah, it really kind of depends on the client, but I
Sure.
mean, I kind of meet them where they're at and what they need. But usually, what it's going to look like, the absolute step one that is usually consistent, is I want to look at the data. So usually, I'm going to be like, "Hey, can you put me as an accountant user in QuickBooks and give me access to the data?" This is after, of course, we met a first time, and
Sure.
I've spent some time and understood what they got going on and what they're trying to figure out. What they're really, sometimes we come to people and we articulate what we think our problem is, and
Mhm.
it doesn't really match what the real problem is, or not because they're being dishonest anyway, they just don't really understand the problem.
Yeah.
Or what is always, it's hard when you come to someone and maybe your business is struggling. Nobody wants to come to someone they've never met and go, "Hey, my business is losing. I'm just
Sure.
overwhelmed. I'm thinking I can't tell you how many times, Jack, sorry, I'm getting a little bit off a tangent here. I can't tell you
Uh-huh.
how many times clients have come to me, potential new clients. They don't tell me this out the gate, but we're like 2 meetings in, and they'll go, "Is my business even viable? Should I just close shop? Should I should I just go out of business?" And
Wow.
that's a heavy freaking toll to be carrying
No
on your
kidding.
back.
Just got
And
chills.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's freaky. And the sad thing is, I'd say 9 out of 10 times, the answer is, dude or dudette, you got a great business. Like there's not a problem. You do have a profit issue. You do have a
Mhm.
cash flow issue, but you've got $4 million of revenue coming in the door, $2 million, 1 million, doesn't matter the amount coming in
Mhm.
the door. You got 74 reviews on Google or wherever it happens to be. You've got a viable business. We need to figure out what the problem here is. Is it a pricing issue? Is it a labor efficiency issue? Is it an overhead issue? And we got to nail that down so that you can feel good about your business and get to certain parameters. Literally wrote up a proposal last night that I set. In that proposal, I said, these are our target metrics of me working with you, what we're trying to work towards. And their first layer, they're not my highest numbers that I would try to get someone towards, but you got to start somewhere. Like, I don't want to have someone go from, someone at 4% net profit. In a perfect world, I'd always love people to be around 20, but in this case, I'd say, I don't want to get you to 10. Let's get to 10. That's going to be our goal, our part of these services I'm going to provide. And this is what I need from you. So, long answer, a little bit of a tangent. Hopefully I covered everything.
No, that is amazing to hear, and uh, it's probably needed to be a long answer. What does your process look like? It probably really depends per
Right.
customer. What does the
Right.
customer? You said it perfectly. Meet them where they're at, and it probably spans a whole bunch of things, which leads me perfectly into my next question. What are the types of things that you help different clients with? What are the A to Z of what CFO Made Easy can do for businesses?
Yeah, once I've worked with someone for a while, what I'm trying to really the role I'm trying to place is their business advisor, their trusted business advisor. In the olden days, that used to be the CPA. Like you used to, if you watch any of those old movies, it's always like the CPA was the right hand person of
Yeah,
that individual, and they could go to him for anyone. That kind of has stopped over the years. I mean, CPA is a lot more compliance driven, and they don't really invest that kind of time in terms of. I'm not saying it's completely out of
mhm,
existence, but it's not nearly what it used to be. So my goal is once they form a relationship with me, it's a little bit more business advisory, and the services are going to, they could really be anything, but the core things that people are going to come to me, they're having cash flow problems. They're looking for a cash flow solution. The problem with cash flow can be a whole bunch of stuff under that. So that could be like, it could be related to labor efficiency. It could be related to your comp plan. I had someone come to me recently. The general guideline for direct labor is about 17 to 20% of sales. I
mhm.
had someone to me that was compensating at 27%, and their profit margin was very low. I'm not saying it was completely because of that, but that was one of the challenges in
Sure.
them getting to a respectable gross profit margin. Looking at gross profit margin, what's driving, if it's not where we want it to be, what's driving that behavior? Could be pricing, could be material cost, could be labor, could be a handful of things. You know, what's other things that getting the books to a state that we can give clean monthly financials, do some light forecasting to look ahead of where we want to be is a lot of times a big part of the service. Um, and then it really, honestly, it encompasses, once that I get into that business advisory role with someone, it almost encompasses to anything. So a lot of my clients, like, I also interface to some degree with CRMs, the various
Mhm.
ones. I'll interface and support them in that area, not as a consultant, but more of a bridge to the accounting data getting into
Totally.
QuickBooks, predominantly QuickBooks Online. So that's another big thing. I think, I have clients come to me that are evaluating services. Like there's some of these incentive program services. We'll sit and do some data crunching in terms of what makes sense for the incentive plan.
Mhm.
Um, Marketing return on advertising is a big one. We'll
Okay.
sit down and kind of go over the return on advertising. So it's a thing, looking at overhead, where are areas of that are we operating over our heads on overhead?
Mhm.
And if we are, we might need to right size it, or we need to be honest about, can we really get revenue to the level to match our overhead? If not, we need to think about right sizing it. So things like that.
Sure. That's an amazing answer. Clearly, you've done this a time or two before, and uh, it's crazy. It's impressive, and a hat tip to you for being able to branch all of these different things. One that stuck out to me, and
Yeah.
just because it's simple, is pricing.
Yeah.
How do you go about helping with pricing? Do you have a research portion where you look into competition in the market? Obviously, it changes based off of demographics or different things. Or you shook your head. I think you have a
Yeah.
great answer loaded up there. I'll just
Yeah.
shut up and
I
let you
feel
get it.
like we didn't, but I felt like we would have practiced this based on what you're asking because it's such a great question. Um, so when it comes to pricing, the biggest flaw, and this actually would have been one of my things on, I think later on we're going to talk about challenge, some of the things we do wrong. And
Mhm.
with pricing, what we do a lot of times, we just look at what our competitors charge and we go, okay, well, we're going to price that. I'll market 10% more, it's 5% less, whatever. And that is like the worst way to do pricing. Like, the way you want to do pricing, and especially in trades, is what I'll do for clients is I'll do a spreadsheet where I lay out what they're paying their technicians, what the burden is related to their technicians. That's the cost, like benefits and payroll taxes and stuff. What is their average efficiency of their technicians? And then what's the overhead of the business? We'll factor in the overhead of the business. And then we'll look at what's the profit we're trying to target. So a lot of times I'll start with a 25% net profit. Now, I'm not going to say we're going to hit that because
Mhm.
a lot of times we can't, because just things, we can't price it to that level
Sure.
for various reasons. But let's say we start with 25%. Then we put all those numbers together and we come up with what your average hourly rate should be to be able to cover your burden, pay your team, cover your overhead, and hit your 25% market, 25% net profit margin. Now you have an hourly rate broken down into what you need to be billing to hit that number. Now I do it in a calculator base so we can play around with, well, what if it's 20%? What if it's 15%? What if it's
Mhm.
5%? Which we never want to be that low, but we could do whatever we want. And what I usually hear is, oh my gosh, I'm way under that. I can't bill that much. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I get it. I hear that all the time. Everybody always says that. You don't have to raise your prices 30%. Don't feel that you do, but why don't we start with 5 or 10%? When's the last time you've raised your prices? Do you know how many times people come to me and they have not raised their prices in the last 3 years? And even though we've gone through all this tariff stuff, we've
Yeah.
gone through, we've just had all kinds of inflation. I know the latest data says there isn't a lot of inflation, but a lot of things have gone up in price. I
Yeah.
don't, I don't know of anything that's gone down for me at least.
Right. Yeah.
So,
If you
but
just
if
think
you,
about it, that's
yeah,
an easy yes.
yeah. So if you haven't baked some kind of increase in, you're losing money. I guarantee you, if I'm looking at your gross profit margin, it's gone down over the last 3 years because
Sure.
if you haven't changed your pricing. So usually, what I'll ask someone to do is, okay, don't go the 30%. I hear you. That's a big jump. Go 5%, go 10%.
Mhm.
See if anyone even notices. See if it affects
Yeah.
anyone. And I don't think I've ever had anybody come back to me and go, "Hey, I raised my prices 10%. I lost half my business." Nobody even says anything. Like nobody even notices. I mean, it's all new clientele, oftentimes, or a certain percentage of it. So that's kind of how I approach that. It's a little bit more than. I just always get worried when people compare themselves to the person down the street because that's a
Hmm.
dangerous way. Your business is totally different in terms of
Right.
cost structure.
And I'm sure you often hear, maybe, well, hopefully not often, well, the price is the price. It's what I charged when I was a tech, and then I brought it over, and you're just missing so many aspects of different things. Uh, and that had never even dawned on me. The fact that prices are probably not, their price book has probably been their price book for 3, 5, 10 years, and it's never been updated, which is just a very clear and simple answer. It's amazing. The other thing too that dawned on me as you're taking us through that is now you understand your pricing. Not only are you better pricing, but now you understand it. Okay, now you see
Right.
our 25% labor cost is a little bit high. How can we train our techs to be more efficient? And you can kind of send those things down the line. And something you were able to explain. And I know the data collection and things like that, but in 5 minutes you can explain conceptually. Now they understand, and it's just such a beautiful thing for businesses to be able to grow.
You are so right on, man. Like when I talk with someone about doing that exercise that we just talked about, their eyes light up. They're like, "Oh, wow, I never even really thought of approaching it that way." And when I go through it with them, because I do the exercise with them, I don't just I don't come back a week later and go, "Oh, here's your result." We're talking through the whole thing, and and I'm doing it intentionally because it's forcing them to think about because
Every
I can't tell
aspect.
you how many times they've told me, "Oh, my efficiency is 70%. My staff is working this number of hours and it's this efficiency," and okay, I plug in those numbers. And I'll say, when we get to a different number, I go, do you think really your efficiency is that? And you can go to reports a lot of times, CRMs and stuff, of how much their individual technicians are producing, and you
Mhm.
can quickly see like what is your average you expect a technician to do in a month, and they'll throw out a figure, and I'll say, okay, well, this one's doing half that, and that would indicate that's not 70% efficiency. And I'm not doing
Right.
it to be rude, or I'm
Right.
trying to point out the challenges with getting the pricing right. And it's eye opening. I really do. I don't think I've ever done it where someone hasn't like walked away going, "Wow, I didn't really think of it that way," or I hadn't considered that. And I think a lot of times we perceive our business, we're so in the weeds, the way we see things isn't necessarily the way it's really happening. Using the technician as an example, we think everybody's highly efficient, maybe, or at least reasonable. And then when we
Hmm.
go look at the data, it might say something different.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Another thing that's coming across in all these different answers is data, and keeping and making sure you have access to it, which I'm sure almost all, if not all, of these businesses do have it. It's just putting sense into it and organizing it, and making sure it reads clearly, which is uh, not the easiest thing. Maybe easier said than done, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, my two mantras would be, and I try not to use this because I think it's overused, but it's knowing your numbers. I mean, it's like the folks that are really excelling know their numbers. I recently went to Epic. It's a conference in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, and home services conference. And I sat in on these breakout rooms, and I sat in all the ones that, because you had a lot of choices, the ones that were guys or ladies that had run really successful businesses. And, I'm talking like 45 million, another was 63 million, another was 120 million. And there was a home service business, HVAC, I think all three of them. But what all three of them, you quickly gleaned, they knew their numbers. Like they could talk about 85%
Like that.
conversion on leads. They could talk about one, Mary Jean Anderson had a wow factor of grading how you're doing your conversion and your speed to lead and stuff like that. They all had their own stories about just knowing their numbers inside their business. So that's one of my mantras. And then my other one, which people I do like, and I say a lot, probably way too much, is growth eats cash. Anybody that wants to grow, they forget how much cash that eats to do it. You have to buy more trucks, you have to more people, and that a lot of times, if you're not prepared for that, that can eat you alive in your cash flow.
Sure. Back to mindset. Like we started the
Yeah.
top of the interview. If you're a little wishy-washy on it and all of a sudden your bank account looks a little less plump than it did a year ago, it's probably easy to start to panic and either bail out or start to make, decisions under stress. That's another thing I wanted to touch on with you. And that's just the idea of financial stress and helping these business owners deal with financial stress. What are some of those conversations like? How often does it come up? And what are strategies to kind of help them through it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tough because there's stages of where someone's at in cash flow. And a lot of times what happens when you're in financial, so there's different levels of financial stress. That's a tough question to answer because there's a financial stress of, hey, you're going out of business, financial stress.
Sure.
And then there's more of routine cash flow issues. So the
Mm-hmm.
routine cash flow issues, I think my job is to convey a calm and to not convey like this is the end of the world. It's like that client that said to me, hey, is our business even viable? They had a great business. I mean, they shouldn't be thinking, are we viable? Should be thinking, how do we fix the problem? Tyler, help us identify the problems and then let's fix them and we're good. So that would be how I would work with that one. Now, having said that, with a long history, which, would indicate how old I am if I get too deep into this, but with a long history, what I have learned is that there are certain clients that are going to go out of business. And there are certain writings on the wall. I had a client come to me not too long ago, and I chose not to work with them because I didn't think I could help them. And I was really honest with them. They were using these payday type loans. I don't think they call them payday anymore, but they're business loans that they auto debit your account every week for a loan payment, and they just sweep your account to pay the loan. And so you're borrowing money, and then you've got these constant loan payments. And she had like 5 or 6 of them, and she was like doing them every time to make her payroll. And she wasn't in the home service space; it was in a different space. And I sat and I gave her a free hour of consultation, which I have no problem doing. I almost do that with anyone as long as my time permits. But my end thing was like, I know this is a hard thing for me to share with you, but if you don't figure out a way like tomorrow to become cash flow positive, and I gave her the numbers that she needed to cover her debt and be able to cover her overhead and stuff like that, you're going to be out of business. And it just is what it is. You're going to go bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, I could just tell she wasn't very coachable. Well, I got her through a referral, so I kind of am in contact with the person that referred me. And this was, I don't know how long ago, but it was within the last few months. And basically, that other person had reached out to me and go, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. They filed BK. And so that's, I've known in my career now, I've dealt with that where I think I'm better at identifying it quickly and being, it's a risk because people don't want to hear, hey, your baby, just it's your baby and it's not going to make it. People don't want to hear that. Like they're like, no, we're getting, and maybe in a few cases they're right. But in most cases, if they don't make dramatic changes like overnight, there's nothing I can do. Like I'm not going to be able to help them. And that's hard for me because I always want to help everybody, but I've learned the hard way where it causes me a lot of stress in my younger days, where I would take someone on that was kind of a sinking ship,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to be part of that. And then I even had to worry from a liability standpoint, like, am I going to get dragged into this? Cause maybe they're going to feel like I didn't give them the right advice. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but those are kind of two scenarios. The one where it's just normal cash flow stuff, trying to keep a calm demeanor, trying to
Yeah.
keep them to believe, but also identifying what they need to improve. That's kind of my more norm of most people that are coming to me have some growing pains.
No, it's an amazing answer, and I think there are probably maybe more than just two, but there are the
Sure.
let's help you, and then there's also the wake up call side of it. And
True.
I'm sure that's very, very difficult, but also, from my perspective, which is easy to sit here and say, it's probably the right thing for you to do. Even if they don't take your advice, at least they have now heard it. And if it becomes apparent in a week, a month, or a year, or maybe they're a touch more prepared. And from your perspective, that's probably all you can do.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right on. I mean, everything you're saying is right on. There's definitely shades of gray in there, but just in terms of the two kind of extremes, I would say.
Sure. Well, I did have written down a worst experience of a company you maybe chose not to work with. We probably covered that, unless there's one that pops into your mind that's beyond that.
I think the one that I do get a fair amount of prospect calls where you've got really big dreamers, I guess I would say, which is nothing wrong with that. In fact, I love that,
Hmm.
but feels very disorganized in terms of the stability of their staff, um, the evenness of the owner in terms of their personality. And if I sense, those types of relationships, um, I know from past experience, I'm probably not going to be able to have a big impact in helping them. Generally, I'm trying to like look. When it's a good fit, is someone that has some element of coachability. Not so much that I'm going to coach them directly, but has self awareness that, hey, I'm coming to you because there's some problems, and I'm open to hearing some
Hmm.
ways to solve those problems. I think that's what I'm generally looking for, because I know I could help them, as opposed to someone that um, isn't going to be as receptive to that, or is maybe volatile in
Yeah.
personality. I mean, I'm sure we've all kind of worked with someone like that, and
Oh, yeah.
and if I can smell that out, I know it's going to take too much of a toll on me to try to get them where I need to be. And so I just oftentimes will choose to pass on those scenarios.
Amazing. Well, that makes sense for the worst. How about a best? Let's get back to the positives. A best, maybe one or two companies. Give us like a general outline where they started with you, and where you took them, or maybe where they're at today.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yesterday I met with a client of mine, and these are always a fun one. He's doubled in size every year for the last 2 years, and
Holy cow.
one thing he said to me, and this is why I always get uncomfortable answering these questions, is he said to me, "Dude, this is all with your help," and I'm like, "No, it has nothing to do with me. It's all about your execution." Because you can give people advice, and this kind of goes back into the worst. Sorry, I'm going there, but you can give people advice all day long if they don't
Hmm.
if they're going to do their own thing, and in some cases maybe it's the right thing, but in a lot of cases it just exacerbates the problem they came to me in the first place.
Hmm.
uh, it's going to be a totally different story. So I think that those win stories I definitely have a lot of, where clients, I have another client I actually met with yesterday too, and she was just going, I've never been in a situation until this year where I no longer have to be in the business all the time. Like I'm trying to figure out what to do with my time. And we talked about like what that should look like, what she still are her strength, her superpower that the business still needs. And she needs to just draw lines around that. And that's what she has to focus on. So I think those are like huge win stories to me. Anytime, it doesn't just have to be numbers, although obviously that's the fun part. It can some be like, how's your life changing as we're implementing some of these things to improve your business?
Sure.
Because another part of big part of my services is, I've seen so many scales of businesses now in terms of their levels that I pretty much understand where they're at if you're a $1 million company, you're probably doing a lot of things yourself.
Hmm.
You're probably stuck in the weeds. You might even have two technicians, but you're really, as the business is you. When you get to 5 million, cash flow could be really challenging. 5 million is arguably one of the toughest levels, because you want to do bigger things, but the cash only stretches out so much. You've gone through a lot of growth. And so I can go all the way up the chain. So a lot of times when I'm talking to owners, I kind of have somewhat of a feeling probably where they're at in their journey.
Hmm.
And then they just need to be receptive to applying those. And that's where I've had my most successes. I think where people are really open and stay with me in terms of implementing changes and improvements to the business.
Fantastic. Showed a lot of humility in that answer, because I agree with your clients maybe that you were a part of that, but you're also right at the same time that you might just be the roadmap. You weren't there day to day, most likely telling them the decisions to make. You assisted in kind of a guiding direction, but I can totally see how that feels good. That's probably why you do what you do, are kind of those types of wins and those types of clients.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, that's the blast, is seeing them scale and seeing them get past hurdles or whatever their goals are. I mean, we didn't talk about this too much, but I think, in that initial meeting is really also kind of understanding what are their goals. Like, what do they want to be?
Sure.
Like, do they want to get it to a 5 year, 5 years or 3 years, they want to get to a certain level and sell to private equity? Is
Hmm.
it, I occasionally have someone to me, I'll ask them, hey, what's your goals with the business? And they'll say, you know what, this is a family business. I don't ever want to sell it. I have zero interest. I just want it to produce well, provide for my family, let the next people step in, and that'll be the legacy. Let the next family member step in.
Yeah.
And my mindset in terms of how I'm going to work with that client is totally different than someone says to me, hey, I want to be out of here in 3 years and have private equity buy me. Our approach is going to be totally different in terms of those two different scenarios.
Yeah. Amazing. One other thing you said, and this kind of touched on it with that last answer, is I want to get out of my business. I
Yeah.
hear that a lot,
Yeah.
and conceptually, it's simple. You want to stop being in the truck, and you want to sit in the office, or take a step back. What does that process actually look like? And I'm sure it's different, but what are some major steps, or maybe major checkpoints that you can take with for a client that has that as a goal?
Yeah, I think a big part, it all comes, and it's boring stuff. It's nothing new here, unfortunately, but a lot of it's going to be driven around processes and systems.
Sure.
And you, as a leader of the business, you have to view yourself as a leader. And I think that sometimes can be hard if you've always kind of been the producer in the business, and you've maybe always been just a really top-notch technician, and then you decided you're going to start your own business. You've never really had formal training of thinking of yourself as a leader, and you really do
Hmm.
need to think that way. Even if it's 4 people in your company, 3 people, you're a leader, and you've got to help your team around you with clear expectations, good training. As much as you obviously can train them in a small business, that can be hard, but get them up to a certain pace of in terms of what you want and quality of work they're doing, what you expect from them in terms of execution. And I think that's a big thing, and a lot of that's laid down by process. Now, one thing that prevents clients from growing, just businesses are growing, I should say, not necessarily clients, is just cash flow. So you got to make your cash flow, you got to make conscious decisions about, especially when you're at like that $1 million level, like, how am I spending every dollar if my goal is to grow it and get me out of the business? It doesn't happen overnight, too. I know a lot of times we read in these books and things we read online, it's like, oh, tomorrow I'll be out of business. Nah, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes, like business, you take a step forward and then you take two steps back. And then you take a step forward and then you take two steps back. But when you look at the map over 2 years or the timeline, you should be ahead. It all works out and you get ahead. We're ahead of where you were 2 years prior. And that's really the goal of getting yourself out of the business, is the more you do those steps of the process, the leadership, you can work yourself out of the business over time. It doesn't, once again, happen overnight.
Amazing. I think that answer too, or that question and answer, will resonate with a lot of our listeners, because I think, it resonates with a lot of people who are watching this type of content, and probably, reaching out and working with you. So that's an amazing answer. Before we start to wrap up, or as we start to wrap up, I have to go ahead and do our hit or miss segment. Hit is a statement that you agree with. Miss is a statement that you
Oh,
disagree with. Off the top, I will say hit or miss. Most service business owners struggle to price their services. I promise I wrote this before we talked about it, but we can touch on it
am
again.
I just allowed a hit, or can I say a double hit?
Let's go double hit.
That's a double hit. That's a double hit. I mean, pricing's definitely one of the bigger issues.
And we'll loop back in the answer because we've already discussed it at length. Hit or miss. If customers don't occasionally complain about price, your price too cheap.
Yeah, I had a boss when I was in my early 20s, and he used to say if few people a year didn't complain about his pricing, he wasn't charging enough. And so I would say generally that's a hit, but I would also put an asterisk because it just depends. I mean, what I would prefer to say, look at your margins. Your margins tell the story. If your gross profit margin isn't getting close, if you're not working towards 50%, 45%, whatever. Industries are a little different, so I don't want to give a number and someone go, oh my God, I'm not that, so I'm bad. That's not necessarily true. It depends on the industry. But if your gross profit margin and net profit margin aren't where you want to be, you're not charging enough.
I think that's probably more than anything a good shock statement where people say, "Whoa, I don't want my customers to complain," but it's
Right.
maybe just trying to illustrate, "Hey, you have to price for profit and you have to price based off of other things besides just the race to the bottom," which I think is a good lesson.
Yeah, that is
Last
a
one
great.
here. Sorry. Hit or miss. A lot of service business owners could benefit from getting financial help or guidance from an outside source.
I mean, that's an obvious hit, so that's a good T-ball. I will say this though, there is an asterisk to that. It's someone that's really qualified, and this is hard. Who's qualified? How do you even know I'm qualified?
Yeah.
It's tough to really know that. But what I see is there's a lot of providers out there. When I talked with you about the negative $300 bank balance, that was a provider doing that work. That wasn't the owner doing that work. That was a
Right. Right.
financial provider, and so you have to be. It's tough, and I don't have a great answer for this, but it has to be a good financial advisor that understands your business and can really help you get to your goals. And if you could find that type of person, then it's an absolute must. It's no different than any other area, truthfully. Like when an owner tries to do their own marketing, that's a mistake. When an
Mhm.
owner tries to have their own CRM on a spreadsheet, that's a mistake. You just got to use those tools and use the right tools so that they're helping you get to your goals, regardless of what area it is. Does that make sense? Is that too long of an answer? I know
Absolutely.
I've got my long answers here.
No, it's okay, and that's why we wanted your expertise on because nobody wants to hear me talk. And I will say it was kind of a shameless t-ball for you, but from my perspective, what I will say is have the conversation, right? If
Yeah.
you're listening to this and you are listening to some of these answers, some of these conversations, and thinking, "Man, that might be something that I could benefit from," call Tyler, call somebody else in the space, come with prepared answers and see what you can get out of a conversation because there is a lot of benefit that can be had from somebody with a little bit of extra expertise looking at your business portfolio and your numbers.
Totally agree. That's great. Great addition.
Amazing. All right, last thing, and this is a loaded question, probably the number one loaded question in an interview of loaded questions. I am known for that. Number one piece of advice, parting advice, if you were to give a service business owner, and you can maybe quantify it a little bit with a size or an industry, what would that number one piece of advice be?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I would probably say growth eats cash. I would land on that is that let's not forget as we're adding staff, as we're adding vehicles, as our insurance is going up, our overhead is going up. Growth eats cash. So don't ever forget that because we all want to add more people and we think it's great, but growth eats cash and that can create cash crunches, especially if you're doing COD type work, you're in a little bit better spot. But if you're carrying any type of AR, that can double the cash crunch because you're performing services and then you're not collecting the money until later. So I would just say growth eats cash, keep focused on that, have good visibility of your numbers, and you will be near the top of the pack if you focus on those types of things.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, Tyler, thank you very, very much for your time today. I learned a lot. Hopefully, our listeners learned a lot.
Yeah.
Last thing before we let you go, where can people find you and where can people support what you do?
Thanks, man. I appreciate you giving me the forum. You are an awesome interviewer. I love your questions. I love your tempo that you keep it. So I want to make sure I say that. Yeah, in terms of reaching out to me, so I've got my podcast is profitandgrit.com. Would love if anybody had the time to be able to just check it out. I think there's a lot of good quality content on that. And then my business website is cfomadeeasy.com, cfomadeeasy.com. I do have an introductory type meeting link in there. I'm happy. Don't ever feel like you need to make a meeting with me because it's a client type thing. You're welcome, even if you just want to pick my brain for 20 minutes. And I have many meetings like that, and it's not necessarily about becoming a client. It's about just getting some information and helping the community. So more than happy to do that.
Awesome. And as always, I always joke that the most value in our podcast is in the description of the show, because that's where we'll link all those places. You can find Tyler, you can get in touch with Tyler and get a whole lot more of this info that I got today, and hopefully work with him.
Thanks, man. You're the best.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tyler. We'll talk to you soon.